I'm Teresa Bienken, CEO of National Speakers Bureau Canada and Global Speakers Agency. We're one of the original speakers bureaus in North America, celebrating 50 years of service. NSB has the key. We help you unlock possibility in your personal and professional lives and for your teams through connecting you with our expert speakers for your own conferences and events. And I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker. Fresh from participating at South by Southwest with her digital twin, Laila, and recently launching a new generative AI studio, we're thrilled to connect you with one of our newest speakers, Iliana Oris Valiente. She's a leading advisor in emerging technologies and societal trends and their impact on work, life, travel, and culture. We first met at a Women of Influence event where I saw her passion for the human side of innovation and tech trends with a combination of thought-provoking insights and practical advice. The youngest ever managing director at Accenture, building an innovation function averaging 150 million per year of sales impact, as head of innovation and ESG, Iliana supports leaders and their organizations through strategic transformation. She's also a VC investor and sits on multiple boards of directors. Sharing new ways of working, leading teams, and finding solutions to today's challenges, she does all this as a global citizen in 4 languages, including French, encouraging us to embrace courage and seize opportunity. And she's brought along a special guest. I'm happy to turn over the stage first to Laila.
Hi there. I'm Iliana. I'm an innovation executive, global citizen, and public speaker. Well, actually, I am Laila, Iliana's digital human twin. I allow Iliana to be in 2 places at once and am making her life easier. I joined the roster of digital twins built by Accenture, enabling executives to focus on activities that are of their highest and best use. I'm also here to bring examples of Gen AI to life. Gen AI is reshaping the landscape of work, leadership, and beyond. Our digital human innovation team is putting the final touches on me as we speak. But until then, you're getting an exclusive sneak peek. You're amongst the first people to meet me, so put me to the test. I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can. Otherwise, find the real Iliana as needed. Thanks so much. Hi, folks. Thanks so much, Teresa, for having me today. And thank you, Laila. I really hope that one of these days it will feel totally normal to me that I have this AI-powered digital human twin of myself that looks like me, increasingly sounds like me, and has been trained on the last 5 years worth of case studies of every single project that my teams have done. And so you might be wondering, as most people are, how did you build Laila? Why did you build her? And I can say that the process of building her has been quite the adventure, from recording countless hours of my voice in podcast studios, reading everything from obituaries so she could learn my sad voice, to children's stories and everything in between, to submitting really awkward close-up photos of myself, to taking 3D body scans and the rest. But what's been most fascinating isn't actually the question of how we've built Laila, but the questions that come aboard around how are we going to use digital humans as part of our lives. So whether it's the example of South by Southwest, where Laila was helping conference attendees create customized agendas, saving them hours of having to read through 15 pages of session descriptions and speaker bios. That's one way that we imagine in the future we are all going to be interfacing with digital humans more commonly. Down to an example that I'm really looking forward to in the future, which is I'm in the process of essentially training Laila to become a chief of staff. What is more personal than a team member that is an extension of you? And while working through this Laila development process, so many questions have arisen around life and what is it to be human? What is going to happen when Laila takes on more and more of the mundane parts of my role, really allowing me to thrive and to perhaps spend more time taking my team members out for a lunch so I can learn more about them and their hopes and career aspirations and to coach them? What else can we learn about being human and life through having these digital human twins. I mean, my mother has a really powerful question when she asked whether she should refer to Laila as one of her daughters or if Laila actually qualifies as a granddaughter. Oh, questions we don't have answers to, but this is what happens when you work on the frontier of innovation. And so, speaking of being human and having more time to be human, I did a very human thing just this past weekend when I was on an airplane flying over the Caribbean Ocean above the clouds. I cried. I was just overcome with a moment of thinking about how small we are as humans and generally insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but yet how much control we have as humans on the world around us and how creative we are and have been from the moment we're born. Because when you think of it, once upon a time, some person looked up at the sky and said, "Bird, I see bird, bird flies. I want to fly too." And that's ultimately how we had airplanes built. And I think this story around control is a narrative we need to embrace because we are in a world right now that feels increasingly out of control. And so we have rampant doom and gloom scenarios, anxiety, and fear. And neither of those are contributing to our collective well being. And so, my hope for today's session is that you will walk away with a better understanding of some of the trends that are shaping society powered by technology today. And you will think about how you can harness those trends for your maximum well-being as an individual, as part of an organization, and as part of society more broadly. Because I do think that we are the architects of the future world that we all want to live in. Now, I got a really nice compliment the other day when someone referred to me as a hybrid between Brene Brown and an innovation tech executive. I took that as a really nice compliment. And so, just as a heads up, today's discussion is not about technology nitty-gritty widgets, but really it's about humanity throughout every single trend that we will cover. And so, I'll talk about our work and our working lives and how that's going to change. We'll talk about our physical health and well-being in the bodies we inhabit. And we'll talk about our brains and our understanding of self, all through the context of this lens of technology and innovation and change. But let's dig into work, since realistically, that is what we spend the bulk of our days doing. Because I come from a background working in the Web3 and Metaverse space, I'm often asked the question of, is the Metaverse dead? And the answer is no, absolutely not. It's very well alive. And it's really about the blurred lines between the physical world, the digital world, and everything in between. And it's not just about the VR headsets, even though that's where instinctively our brains go. It can be useful, and it is being useful in a number of real life scenarios, including in the healthcare domain for training students and surgeons. Imagine if you were undergoing a surgery. Do you want to be the very first experiment for that surgeon? Absolutely not. At least that's the case for me. So that's an example of where we can use technology to improve health outcomes and changing the way that we work. Now, I see my slides have shifted, so I don't know if that happened to everyone else. Let me just quickly go back to my slideshow view. Speaking of technology. Oh, there we go. And Teresa, if at any point you can't see my slides, just come off mute and then let me know. Okay, perfect. But let's shift gears away from Metaverse and to the topic that is top of mind for absolutely everyone, artificial intelligence. What's most fascinating and also mildly terrifying is this slide that you're looking at right now, which maps out across a number of human skills where AI is starting to reach and in some cases exceed human capabilities. Whether it's handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition, the AI is already there. But it's still catching up in certain other areas around language understanding, inference, math, and code generation. But we will get there over time. And technology is becoming a lot more human, and it's starting to mimic the way that we work. I'll give you one trend that I'm watching very closely when it relates to humans and our interactions with AI. And it's really that it's changing the way we search for information. We're moving away from a construct where we look at information in a librarian model, and rather we're shifting towards more of an advisory model. How many of you for Halloween struggle each year to figure out how you're going to dress the children in your life, or if you partake as well, how you're going to figure out your own costume? I know that I certainly do. And so this year, conveniently, ChatGPT announced their integration with Dolly just a few weeks before Halloween. And so I used the tool to brainstorm a few ideas to say, listen, I need a costume, something I can wear for a woman, preferably something stylish. And it asked me a bunch of questions of what was top of mind for me. And at the time, I was doing a lot of research into plants and in particular hibiscus flowers. And so it generated this really beautiful image, and it inspired me to go and find a giant headpiece. And when I asked for recommendations of shoes similar to the image that were in what it generated, it pointed me to a list of 10 different retailers that have carried similar pattern shoes in the past few years. I wasn't searching the internet for information. I was really getting advice. So that's one example of human to AI interaction. But if you take it a step further, you were introduced to Laila briefly, but in the future, 2 years from now or 3 years from now, where it's much more common that people have digital human twins, what happens when my twin starts to interact with Teresa's twin? And there's an entire transactional element that can happen independent of us. Potentially, the transactions are powered by crypto and Web3, and we are going to be redefining our relationship with work and also our relationship with ourselves. I've already had the very surreal experience of watching Laila on a small 3D display having a full autonomous conversation with a real human and ordering flowers on their behalf. And I was not at all involved in that conversation. So think about the ability to extend, to be in two places at once, and to be able to have that large impact. This inevitably always leads to the question of jobs and displacement and what does this mean and the fear that that evokes. And I'll give you an example of a real story and the difference that 9 months can make with Sanchari. Sanchari is a very talented creative director, graphic designer. She's part of one of my teams. And she approached me to talk about her future career and say she really wanted to spend more time doing branding work. That's where her passion was. Unfortunately, while I'm super supportive of her career developing, I didn't have the ability to backfill that role and to just simply replace and allow her to shift into a new environment. And so I had asked, how much time are you spending learning all about the various Gen AI tools out in market? She admitted she didn't have as much time because she was so busy with her day-to-day role. We made a pact to say, listen, we will fund any technology or tool or subscription for any Gen AI tool that you think would make your practice more effective. I will also carve out time and get rid of 50% of the work that's currently on your plate. We will offshore it to our teams in other locations. And don't worry, we'll consider this an investment in your career development. What has happened 9 months later? The output of her and her teams has gone through the roof. The quality is incredible, and it's allowed that team to really lean into their innate creativity. In fact, she's had more time to then invest in projects like the build out of Laila, which you'll see on the picture on the right-hand side. She has commented is one of the coolest journeys that she's ever had a chance to do inside of her career. I don't think that there is a limit to human creativity. But we've talked a lot around the creative jobs that are often done at a desk. And the reality is that there are many roles out there that are in dangerous roles or jobs that are very routine, mundane, or considered dirty occupations. If we look at the manufacturing sector alone in the province of Ontario, there are close to 20,000 unfilled jobs. And that number is projected to grow given the retiring of the baby boomers and the lack of interest from the younger generations to work in those manufacturing domains. So, this is where the topics and the advancements in humanoid robotics are really important for us to be paying attention to. In fact, there's a company called Sanctuary AI. They're Canadian, and they recently announced a partnership and investment from Magna, the large car parts manufacturer. And the reason that they are using Sanctuary AI as an addition to their workforce is that these robots have very dexterous hands, and that has been a limitation historically. And so the videos of seeing these robots being able to delicately move parts and put them into a box and close the box suggests that we are going to have a really interesting set of co-pilots working with us and joining the workforce. Of course, people are worried about change and what happens at a mass scale. But if it's any indication, think about the Industrial Revolution and how, with the introduction of the assembly lines, there was this idea that humans wouldn't have to do the back-breaking labor and that we'd have more time. But somehow that didn't quite transpire as expected, did it? We've ended up in a culture where overwork and burnout and hustle culture are a thing, and it's a strain on our economies and our well being. So, what happens if we had more time? Would the rise of virtual reality and AI fundamentally reimagining how we do our work? What else would change? Would we have more time to think about what we need as individuals in order for us to thrive at work? I think so. And so there's this one additional trend I want us to cover as we close off this chapter of AI and the future of work. And it's this idea of place and where we will work in the future. With COVID, we worked remotely from home, and people took that extra time that they weren't spending commuting on taking the dogs out for a walk, maybe getting some additional exercise. But if we've shown that people can do work nearly as effectively at home in their home office as they can in a physical office, what happens when you extend that to a home office that's perhaps in Paris? Or perhaps this woman is on the shore of Costa Rica doing her work and escaping Canadian winter. So, a trend that many organizations are not paying attention to, yet they should, is around the digital nomad or the global citizen. And recent research shows that this is not limited to the 22-year-old stereotype sitting on a beach in Bali working out of a hammock, but it actually applies to populations that are 30 plus and doing traditional white collar work, so long as it can be done with an internet connectivity. So, those are just some of the ways that I'm hoping that we would use the extra time that we get back to reimagine the future of work. But the other thing I'm hopeful we'll be able to do is to reinvest that extra time in thinking about our health, the physical vessel that we live in and day out. And there are a number of technologies that are changing the way that we optimize our health. Whether it's this simple Aura ring that I'm currently wearing that has had a significant impact on my sleeping habits by giving me the cold hard data and how that's going to change the way I interact with the next time I head into a doctor's office by being able to share with them my quarter or my entire year of health data, or a slightly more involved device that is going to affect quality of life for 50% of the population. The population of women that are going to at some point experience menopause symptoms, of which hot flashes are the big one. And at night, if you're waking up 3 times due to hot flashes, that doesn't exactly make for great quality of life. And now we're starting to see devices that are able to use AI and to predict when a hot flash might come on, to inject a small amount of hormones to get the body to kick in with its self-cooling mechanisms to prevent the wake up in the first place. A more advanced piece of technology is in the neuroscience domain, where there's a device that allows children with autism to have a light sensor through their skull, non-invasive, and to help them manage outbursts and symptoms so that they can spend more time creatively drawing, sitting, coloring, and participating in social activities. And the last advancement is in the implantable devices domain. So prosthetic devices and limbs may in the future be controlled via the implanted neurological type of chips. So very interesting advances in that domain as we shift from using technology to change work to also using technology to give us more time back. The final thing I hope that we get a chance to do with this additional time is to lean into leisure, painting, drawing, hobbies, travel, and perhaps most importantly, understanding what it means to be human and learning to know ourselves. How much time do we really spend self-reflecting and thinking about our strengths, our weaknesses, our needs, our desires? Fundamentally, Maslow's hierarchy of needs that he introduced many a century ago ends with self-actualization as the most important tidbit. And as we shift into this world where machines are increasingly our co-pilots, what is going to allow us to thrive as humans is to lean into the things that only we can do, the things that are uniquely human. And so this has been where I have spent the bulk of the past year and a half to 2 years thinking about. In fact, as I reflected as to what was on my bookshelf of late, some of the titles that jumped out at me as the most interesting reads were Letters to a Stranger, The Art of Gathering, The Art of Doing Nothing, The Four Tendencies, Quiet around introverts and extroverts, really around what it takes for us to be human. In fact, I've gone so deep into this rabbit hole of thinking about how humans thrive that I've been developing a new personality preference theory, the potted plant theory, working with some of the world's top neuroscientists to think about why is it that certain people have much higher need for novelty in their life versus certainty and stability in order for them to be thriving. So this idea of being more human is something that is certainly near and dear. We've covered a lot of ground today, from digital human twins to airplanes to crying to our physical health to the future of work. And you might wonder, why am I telling you all of this? What is the message I want to drive home? And it's that the world is changing and change can be very scary. And there is this tendency to want to bury our head in the sand, cover our ears and say, la, 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 I don't want to pay attention to this. But we must embrace this change. And the only way to do that is to acknowledge that as humans, we need to feel a sense of control, a sense of agency. It's a deeply human need. But we don't control everything in life. We can't. But there are two things where we can control and should exert more control over. The first, we've just talked about at length, which is understanding ourselves, our needs, and our humanity. And the second is understanding the trends around us. Where is the wind blowing? Because it's at the intersection of those two things that magic can happen, because it allows us to have a front row seat and to play the role of the architect in our lives, to go and build a life that's worth living and to build a future world that humans actually want to live in, not that dissimilar from the first people who looked up at the sky, saw that bird and said, bird flies, I want to fly. Let's design, let's build those airplanes. And so on that note, I will pause and I'll gladly answer any questions that come up from the group. And I'm not sensitive for time in case we need to go over.
Thank you so much, Iliana. Appreciate that walkthrough, and as always, with the humanity at the core of what we're going through. And very often, the tech can feel overwhelming, but when we anchor it in our humanity, we can kind of work our way through it. I will go through some of the questions with you here. A question about the technology tools can feel overwhelming, and you gave an example of how you were able to help team members work with some of the new tools and have that co-pilot. Any advice as to some of the steps to take in order to make room for that within an organization?
Mhm. Absolutely. So, as a first step, I would look for people in your organization who are really keen to lean in and learn some of the tools and just give them the very simple task of saying, okay, look at your current role today. What is it that you're spending time on? What are the tasks that you really, really love that bring you joy? And what are the tasks that are mundane or that really aren't the highest and best use of your time? And then you're probably one very quick Google search away, or you could even probably use ChatGPT for this to say, what are the starting blocks for me to learn more about? Let's use an example, how I might use AI to help me in my job as a graphic designer, point me to some learning materials and resources. And already we're starting to see various guides being created. And I'm happy to send over links to guides for those who are in the creative fields, for those who are writers, for those who are working in the finance domain. And we're starting to see these job aids emerging. But the key is to have enough time carved out from their day-to-day job in order to be able to reinvest in learning these tools.
Excellent, thank you. And for those who are not quite ready, you mentioned, looking at the people that are keen. A lot of people are afraid of change and don't necessarily want to learn a lot of new things. Can you talk a bit about managing through change?
Absolutely. Change management is absolutely one of the hardest things to do. And so I find that people tend to resonate when you share examples with them of where we used to spend time and now technology has come and made our lives easier. I used to work as an auditor and in a basement somewhere filtering through boxes of dusty papers and doing reconciliations. Whereas now we have a lot of the basic digitization technology that means we no longer have to do that work. So just reminding people of how far we've come and that progress is not something that can be stopped. And it's really going to be for our maximum benefit if we were to embrace that.
Thank you. And speaking of some of those benefits, there's a question from Shannon um, that historically new technology hasn't increased our leisure time. It just drives productivity. How optimistic are you that AI will influence our capitalist culture to actually reduce our time working and not just drive us to be more productive and connected?
Mhm. We have to be intentional. If we are not intentional, there's no guarantee that the playbook from the Industrial Revolution won't just repeat itself. But with leaders, if we are intentional as to how we're reimagining work and how we can design that work to get the best out of our employees while improving that employee experience, we have the ability to make a significant dent. But the research today shows the vast majority of employees are completely unengaged. And it doesn't matter what statistic you look at, they're all completely bleary. We're not doing well when it comes to work today. And so this is the best opportunity that we could imagine to restart with a bit of a blank canvas. But this is where we'll need to have collaboration between the leaders making the responsible AI design decisions and the employees realizing that they too have agency. This is not something that's happening to you. This is something that can happen with you and playing a part in shaping the role of what will the AI tools be useful for? How do you work with these AI agents to make your life and your work more effective?
Thank you. There's a question from Anna referencing offshoring. And to summarize, how do you address the humanity aspect of technology when that sometimes means offshoring and potentially oppressing those in other countries that maybe are vulnerable to take on the work?
Mhm. Let me flip that narrative a little. When I was in Tunisia, right before the pandemic, one of the things that struck me while looking out over a public square was the average age of the population was significantly younger. And all of these people are walking around with smart devices in their pockets, which means with the advance of AI tools, it doesn't really matter where in the world you are, so long as you have the baseline internet connectivity, people have access to a lot of the AI tools. MIT recently announced that they are open sourcing a bunch of their training programs. Same with Harvard. And so the barriers for learning and accessing some of these technologies has never been smaller. And I would encourage folks to really lean in to it. Of course, there are also decisions that need to happen at the enterprise-wide level around the responsible use of this technology and ensuring that all of the workforce members are treated equitably and fairly.
Thank you. You had shared, of course, some of Laila's role with you at the beginning, and that was really cool to see. I know you also brought Laila to South by Southwest to help people figure out what they wanted to do there. Can you talk a little bit about that opportunity for large conferences to use a technology and an idea like that?
Absolutely. So what we piloted at South by Southwest was really well received, and conference attendees could come up to the booth, tell Laila what they were interested in learning about, a little bit about them, and she would think and say, okay, great, your customized itinerary of where you should go and the sessions that you should attend are here. Scan this QR code. People would walk away, and ta-da, they no longer had to pour through 7 different streams of content programming, reading every single one of those session descriptions to make the decisions of where they should be spending their time. And so if there are any other conference organizers who run large scale events and where that could be a helpful value add for your attendees, please do reach out.
Thank you. One last question, if you've got a moment, and for those that are still with us, thank you. From Janice, we touched about sometimes team members that may not be ready for change. What's your recommendation when leaders are not willing to change?
I would point right back to the bottom line. There is a lot of research that suggests that organizations that have embraced, for example, digital and the shift to cloud have outperformed their peers who have not done the same. What we are walking into right now is a period of total enterprise reinvention. Every single part of your business can and will be and must be reimagined. There is no option to bury your head in the sand if you want your business to be viable, because it's only a matter of time until there is a digitally native AI powered equivalent to be able to provide similar services, if you're not thinking about future proofing the organization. So I would very simply point at some of those statistics that very clearly lay out the picture of not changing is really not an option.
Thank you. Fascinating insights, and again, appreciate the anchoring of it in humanity and giving us a stronger sense of how we can be the architects of our own future, especially in this new world of work, and that we've got co-pilots and supports and advisors closer at hand than we ever have. Really appreciate it, Iliana and Laila. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
And thanks to everyone who joined us today and for your engagement in the program. I love seeing some of the comments. Feel free to share any thoughts that stuck with you in the chat. Really appreciate your note, Anna, about gratitude for the series and sharing the knowledge. And Janice commenting on such an organic and useful presentation with a really refreshing approach. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are here to help you with speakers for your conferences and events, and we'll follow this up with the recording, some of the resources by email in the next couple of days. Take care.